May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our God. Good morning. On August 18th, a few short weeks from now, the 11th anniversary of the death of Brother Roger, the founder of the Taizé community in France. Brother Roger was born in Switzerland, studied theology, Protestant theology, and in the 1930s, he and a few of his fellow students and theologians came to believe that war in Europe might be avoided if Christians could unite. So he left Switzerland in 1940, he and a few of his fellow religionists, and went to the Burgundy region in France, to the little town of Taizé. And there they bought a house and took monastic vows. They ran into a little trouble during World War II in France because they harbored some of the French resistance fighters during the occupation of France by Germany and were forced to go back to Geneva for a bit. But after the war, went back to France, went back to the little tiny village of Taizé, and started their community anew. Today, tens of thousands of visitors travel to Taizé today. Brother Roger and his monks developed the chants we know and sing today here at St. Luke's each Good Friday, known as the Taizé service. Brother Roger spoke to 100,000 youth gathered in Paris in 1995 and told them, "We have come here to search, or go on searching, through silence and prayer, to get in touch with our inner life. Christ always said, 'Do not worry, give yourself.' Get in touch with your inner life, give yourself." This is the takeaway from today's gospel, the parable of the rich man. So the story opens with a farmer, a few lines about a farmer who, from the perspective of listeners in the first century Palestine, would have seemed immensely blessed by God. This man had a life of abundance. The rich man in the story is a hard worker. He's built up savings. And note in this parable, there's no scolding about the man's wealth or his savings. And yet, Jesus calls him a fool and gives a dire warning of imminent death as if piling up of goods was a capital offense. So we get a picture of a rich farmer whose focus appears to be solely on himself, his own possessions, the storing of goods, and his sense of accomplishment about that. Here's the problem that Jesus points to in pretty strong language, and it's hinted in the first line of the parable. The land of the rich man produced abundantly. The land, the abundance, is gift. But the rich farmer doesn't mention God. We get a snapshot of his inner life. And what do we hear? Well, first of all, who is he having the conversation with? Himself. And it's all about what he has done. Look at what I have done. What should I do? I have no place to store my crops. I will do this. I will pull down my barn. I will store all my grains and goods. And I will say to my soul. Followers of Jesus during this time would have understood the term fool differently than we would today. Think about a time when you felt foolish, done something absent-minded, maybe lost your keys. In the biblical tradition, a fool is someone who acts as if God does not exist. And that's Jesus' problem with this guy. The issue isn't the farmer's abundance. The problem is that his wealth had displaced God. His possessions were his source of security. Absent is a thought about sharing his harvest with others. Absent is a thought of others at all. He appears to worship two gods, self and wealth. Luke's parable prompts us to ponder how we invest our lives, how we orient our lives. The parable ends with a dark warning to those who are obsessed with possessions and miss God, those who are not rich to God. Wealth, possessions, may make us feel secure. But the essential question is, are we being rich to God? Being rich to God has much to do with getting in touch with the inner life. In Brother Rogers' words, with giving yourself. Brother Roger was one of those rare people who succeeded in being rich to God. He opened himself entirely to God and God's love as his rule of being, a love that drew him into community with friends and strangers, tens of thousands of strangers each year. I was reminded of Brother Roger on Tuesday with the tragic news of the terrorist killing of the French priest, Father Jacques Hamel, 85 years old, during Mass, in a small rural village in France, in Normandy. Brother Roger had a similar death. He was murdered on an August evening in 2005 during a Taizé service, 90 years old, with 2,500 visitors in attendance, by a woman who stabbed him in his throat. Not ISIS, but a woman who wanted his attention. The manner of his death was shocking. I remember feeling utterly devastated when I heard about that violence in that peaceful, spirit-filled, loving community in rural France. Unimaginable. Brother Roger, Taizé. I stayed at the Taizé community for a week in 2004, the summer before Brother Roger was killed, along with visitors, monks, and Brother Roger participated in services that week. I had flown to Geneva, rented a car, and decided that I would drive to Taizé from Geneva. I had read that I needed to drive through the very rugged Jura Mountains to get there. Did not quite imagine how rugged they were. My pilgrimage began as I prayed my way driving through the old Roman route, the narrow roads, the hairpin turns, trying to look only a few feet in front of me, not at the precarious rock to the right or the left. But once in Taizé, the terrain turned to gorgeous, idyllic country roads, farms, centuries-old stone houses and walls. Simplicity was the rule at Taizé. The things of life, possessions left behind. As a visitor, I slept in a room with 2 sets of bunk beds, must say not very comfortable, with 3 other women, strangers at first. Sinks and showers were timed so a small bit of water comes out and then shuts off within a few seconds. Meals were served in large tents, where each person got 1 small red bowl, like a cereal bowl, and 1 utensil. 1 utensil was the spoon, and that served as knife, fork, and spoon for all meals. Meals were very simple, bread, and whatever could be eaten with that spoon. Visitors took turns helping and cleaning up after meals, and the days were filled with quiet reflection, prayer, and Taizé services. The chants, the meditative chants that we at St. Luke's and people around the globe have come to identify simply as Taizé. Was it Brother Roger that he had no theology? Yeah, he did. He gathered a group of people together who sought above all reconciliation. repeated these words: Christ did not come to earth to create a new religion, but to offer every human communion with God. God can do nothing other than love. He liked to quote St. Augustine, "Love and say it with your life." He lived it and died loving and saying it with his life. The Taizé community lives on, inviting visitors to welcome very simply the love that God bears towards everyone, root our lives in that love, and take the risks that implies. Sounds a lot like another icon of Christian witness in the U.S., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, another believer in Christian love as a way of being, love as a means of reconciliation, and the non-violent way towards justice and racial equality. He wrote about being extremists for love from a jail in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. He wrote, "Was not Jesus an extremist in love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for them that spitefully use you." He continued, "So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremist will we be? Will we be extremists for hate, or will we be extremists for love?" Jesus Christ was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness. Brother Roger, Martin Luther King, reminds us of how to be rich towards God in today's complicated globe. During these summer days, the sometimes relentless pace of life slows. We take time off from work, spend more time outside, away from possessions, in the garden, on the water, with families, with friends. It's a good time to reflect